Captain Jake Morrison felt his heart beating fast as he walked through the massive halls of the Galactic Council building. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue light, and the ceiling was so high he could barely see it. He had been chosen to represent all of Earth for this meeting, and the weight of that responsibility pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy stone. 3 years had passed since humanity first made contact with the galactic community, and 2 years since they had been accepted as junior members of the vast alliance that controlled most of the known galaxy. Jake had studied hard to learn about the different alien species that ruled this council, but seeing them in person was completely different from reading about them in reports. The Veltar Empire representatives stood nearly 12 feet tall, and their bodies looked like they were carved from living diamond. Light passed through their crystalline skin and created rainbow patterns that danced across the floor. They moved with slow, deliberate motions, and when they spoke, their voices sounded like music played through expensive speakers. The humans had learned that the Veltar controlled nearly 40% of the galaxy and had technology so advanced it seemed like magic. The Zephyrian delegation looked completely different, with their reptilian features and scales that shifted color based on their emotions. They were smaller than the Veltar, but their sharp teeth and clawed hands made it clear they were not to be taken lightly. The Zephyrians controlled the largest military force in the galaxy, and their ships were known to be the fastest and most dangerous in any battle. The third major power was the Luminary, who barely seemed solid at all. Their bodies were made of pure energy that took roughly humanoid shape, but constantly shifted and flowed like water made of light. They rarely spoke, but when they did, their words carried the weight of wisdom gathered over thousands of years. The Luminary were said to be the oldest species in the galaxy, and they controlled all the major trade routes between star systems. Jake wore his best Earth military uniform, which suddenly felt very plain and primitive, compared to the flowing robes and energy fields that the other species used for clothing. His simple fabric and metal decorations looked like children's toys next to the advanced materials that surrounded him. But he stood straight and kept his expression calm, even though inside he felt like a country farmer who had wandered into a palace by mistake. The council chamber itself was enormous, with seats arranged in a circle around a central speaking platform. Each species had their own section designed to meet their specific needs. The Veltar sat on platforms that amplified their natural light, while the Zephyrians had heated rocks that kept their cold-blooded bodies comfortable. The Luminary simply floated in the air without needing any physical support at all. High Counselor Vextherin rose from his crystal throne, and the entire chamber fell silent. His voice filled the space without any visible microphone or speaker system, and Jake realized the aliens had technology that could project sound directly into his brain. The effect was disturbing, but he tried not to let it show on his face. Captain Morrison of the species known as humans, Vextherin began with a tone that made Jake think of a teacher talking to a slow student. "You have been summoned before this council to discuss your people's progress since joining our great alliance." Jake stepped forward onto the speaking platform and felt hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. Some of those eyes were not even visible to human sight, but he could sense them watching and judging everything about him. "I am honored to represent humanity before this distinguished council," he replied, keeping his voice steady and respectful. "Commander." Scrath of the Zephyrians made a sound that might have been laughter, but sounded more like steam escaping from a broken pipe. The scales on his neck shifted to a deep red color, which Jake had learned meant amusement or contempt. "Captain Morrison, your species has been under our observation for 3 full galactic cycles since you were granted junior membership status. The results of this observation have been most revealing." The Luminary representative Sage Elvin began to glow brighter, and her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We have watched your people attempt to adapt to galactic civilization, and we have reached certain conclusions about your capabilities and your future role in our community." Jake felt a cold knot forming in his stomach, but he kept his expression neutral. "I would be very interested to hear the council's assessment," he said, even though he was beginning to suspect he would not like what they had to say. Vextherin gestured with one of his crystal appendages, and suddenly the air above the platform filled with holographic images. Jake saw Earth ships struggling to keep up with alien vessels during joint training exercises. He saw human diplomats looking confused during trade negotiations that involved concepts their minds could barely grasp. He saw human scientists staring in wonder at alien technology they had no hope of understanding. Your species demonstrates consistent patterns of intellectual and physical limitation. Vex Theron continued in that same patronizing tone. Your fastest ships require weeks to travel distances that our vessels cross in hours. Your most advanced weapons cannot penetrate even our basic defensive systems. Your brightest minds struggle to comprehend scientific principles that our children learn in their first cycles of education. Krath stood up and his scales shifted to orange, which Jake knew indicated aggressive excitement. Furthermore, your people show disturbing tendencies toward violence and unpredictable behavior. You still settle disputes through physical combat, and your history is filled with wars fought over resources and territory that could be easily shared through proper organization. Vin's form pulsed with what Jake was beginning to recognize as disapproval. Most concerning of all, you seem unable to accept your proper place in the natural order. Your people constantly ask questions about technology and methods that are far beyond your current level of development. This shows a dangerous lack of wisdom and humility. The other council members began making sounds of agreement, and Jake realized that this was not a discussion or evaluation. This was a pronouncement that had already been decided. The three major powers had brought him here, not to listen to what humanity had to say, but to deliver a judgment they had already made. Vex Theron raised his voice, and the crystal walls seemed to vibrate with the sound. Therefore, this council has reached a unanimous decision regarding the future of the human species within our galactic community. Effective immediately, all human settlements and activities will be relocated to the Outer Rim territories where your people may develop at their own pace without interfering with the progress of more advanced civilizations. Jake felt like he had been punched in the stomach, but he forced himself to remain standing. The Outer Rim was where the galaxy dumped all the species they considered too primitive or dangerous to live near civilized worlds. It was essentially exile disguised as relocation. With respect, honored counselors, Jake said carefully, I believe you may be underestimating what humanity is capable of achieving. The chamber exploded with sounds that Jake realized was alien laughter. Vex Theron's crystal body flashed with bright colors, and Skarath's scales turned yellow with what Jake knew was mockery. Even Aelvin seemed to pulse with amusement. Captain Morrison, Vex Theron said when the laughter died down, your people still propel their spacecraft using controlled explosions and metal projectiles for weapons. You have not even mastered basic energy manipulation or quantum field theory. What could a species at your level of development possibly accomplish that would change our assessment? Jake looked around the chamber at all the alien faces filled with condescension and contempt. These beings saw humanity as nothing more than clever animals that had somehow learned to speak. They had already decided that humans would never amount to anything important in galactic civilization. Very well, Jake said quietly. If that is the Council's decision, then humanity will comply with your relocation orders. As he turned to leave the chamber, Jake Morrison carried with him the memory of every dismissive gesture and contemptuous laugh. The aliens thought they knew everything about humanity, based on what they had been shown. They had no idea that humans had learned long ago to keep their most dangerous capabilities hidden until the moment they needed them most. 3 months after the humiliation at the Galactic Council, Admiral Lisa Carter sat in the most secure room on Earth, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room had no windows, and the walls were lined with metal that blocked every kind of signal or scanning technology known to exist. Around the oval table sat the 5 people who would decide humanity's real response to the alien insult. Dr. Alex Rodriguez tapped his fingers nervously on the table as he reviewed the data on his tablet. For 2 years, he had been working in complete secrecy on projects that the aliens knew nothing about. The Galactic Council thought they had seen all of humanity's technology, but they had only been shown what Earth's leaders wanted them to see. The real advances had been hidden away in underground laboratories and private research facilities scattered across the planet, Colonel. Ben Harper looked calm as always, but his eyes held a cold anger that had been building since Jake Morrison returned from the council meeting. Harper had spent 30 years studying warfare and strategy, and he understood something that the aliens clearly did not. The most dangerous enemy was not the one who showed off their weapons, but the one who kept their best capabilities secret until the moment they needed them most. Dr. Emma Walsh spread biological charts across the table showing detailed analysis. of every alien species in the Galactic Council. For 3 years, she had been collecting samples and data during every diplomatic meeting and cultural exchange. The aliens thought she was just a curious scientist, but she had actually been mapping their weaknesses with the thoroughness of a military intelligence officer. Captain Jake Morrison sat quietly at one end of the table, still feeling the sting of the Council's dismissive laughter. But now that anger had transformed into something much more useful. He had memorized every detail of the alien council chamber and every word that had been spoken. The aliens had made the mistake of underestimating humanity, and Jake was determined to make sure they regretted that error. Admiral Carter looked around the table at each of her colleagues before speaking. "The Galactic Council has made their position clear," she said in a voice that carried decades of military command. "They see us as primitive children who need to be relocated away from civilized space. They think our technology is laughable, and our capabilities are limited to what they observed during our first contact protocols." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward with excitement barely contained in his voice. "They have no idea what we've actually been developing," he said as he activated a holographic display that showed technical blueprints the aliens had never seen. While they were busy showing us their hyperspace networks and dimensional gateways, we were working on something completely different. The hologram showed a sleek spacecraft unlike anything humanity had revealed to the galactic community. Instead of the bulky chemical rocket engines that powered Earth's public fleet, this ship had no visible propulsion system at all. The hull was covered in geometric patterns that seemed to bend light around them, and the entire design looked more like a work of art than a machine built for war. "Quantum displacement technology," Rodriguez continued as the hologram rotated to show internal systems. "We don't need their hyperspace lanes or dimensional portals. We can fold space itself and appear anywhere in the galaxy without using any of their controlled travel methods. No hyperspace signatures, no dimensional rifts, no advance warning. We simply exist in one place and then exist in another." Colonel Harper activated his own display, showing tactical information that made Admiral Carter's eyebrows rise. "For the past 18 months, we've been building a fleet that operates on completely different principles than anything the aliens have seen," he explained. "They've spent thousands of years perfecting energy weapons and defensive shields. Very impressive technology, but they've forgotten some basic principles of physics." The display showed what looked like simple metal rods, but Harper's explanation revealed their true nature. "Kinetic bombardment systems," he said with satisfaction. "Tungsten carbide projectiles accelerated to 90% of light speed using magnetic field generators. The aliens' energy shields are designed to deflect energy beams and plasma bursts. They're completely useless against solid matter moving at relativistic velocities." Dr. Walsh smiled as she brought up her own research data, and while they were busy demonstrating their superior biology and enhanced physical capabilities, I was learning exactly how their bodies actually work, she said as anatomical displays filled the air above the table. "Did you know that Veltar nervous systems operate on a very specific electromagnetic frequency that can be disrupted with the right signal? Or that Zephyrian respiratory systems require a particular mix of gases that becomes toxic if you change the proportions by just 2%. Admiral Carter studied the information her team had presented and felt a cold satisfaction building in her chest. The aliens thought they knew humanity's limitations because they had only seen what Earth's diplomats had chosen to show them. But every species that survived to reach the stars had learned the same basic lesson about survival. You never showed your enemy your real capabilities until you absolutely had to use them. The Council wants to relocate us to the Outer Rim territories," Carter said as she stood up and walked to a wall display that showed a map of the galaxy. "They think they're punishing us by sending us away from their civilized worlds. What they don't realize is that they're giving us exactly what we need." Jake Morrison spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "Isolation," he said with a grim smile. "No alien observers, no diplomatic protocols, no need to pretend we're still struggling with basic technology. They're essentially giving us permission to reveal our true capabilities without any witnesses to warn them what's coming." Colonel Harper nodded as he pulled up fleet deployment schedules. 17 major council worlds, each one convinced that humans are too primitive to pose any kind of threat. Perfect targets for a demonstration they'll never forget. Dr. Rodriguez was practically vibrating with excitement as he explained the timeline. "The quantum displacement drives are ready for full deployment. We can have ships in position around every major council world simultaneously. No travel time, no advance warning, no possibility of escape or preparation. Dr. Walsh added her own contribution to the plan. And once we're in position, we can demonstrate exactly how much we've learned about their biology. Not enough to cause permanent harm, but certainly enough to make them very uncomfortable, and very aware that we could do much worse if we chose to. Admiral Carter looked around the table one more time before making the decision that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The Council made their judgment based on incomplete information, she said with finality. They saw our exploration ships and assumed that represented our peak technology. They saw our peaceful diplomatic approach and mistook it for weakness. That was their mistake, not ours. Jake Morrison felt the same cold anger that had been building since his return from the council chamber. When do we show them how wrong they were? He asked. Admiral Carter smiled for the first time since the meeting began. 6 months, she said. Long enough for them to think we've accepted their judgment and started our relocation. Long enough for them to forget that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that lets you think you're the hunter. The meeting ended, with each team member returning to their secret projects, but now they had a timeline and a target. The Galactic Council had made the mistake of insulting humanity without bothering to learn what humanity was really capable of accomplishing. In 6 months, they would discover that some lessons are best taught through demonstration rather than words. The aliens wanted to see primitive humans relocated to the edge of civilized space. Instead, they were about to learn that civilization had many different definitions and that underestimating a species based on limited information was a mistake that carried serious consequences. The countdown to humanity's real introduction to galactic politics had officially begun. Commander Zektul was enjoying his morning meal aboard the Veltar monitoring station when every alarm in the facility began screaming at once. The crystalline being dropped his energy supplement and rushed to the main control center where his staff was staring at displays that showed readings they had never seen before. The station orbited in deep space between 17 major council worlds, and its job was to watch for any unusual activity in what the aliens considered empty territory. Report. Zektul commanded as his form flashed with the colors that indicated urgent concern. His subordinates were moving between control panels with the jerky motions that meant they were either very excited or very afraid. Sir, we are detecting massive energy. Signatures appearing simultaneously. Around 17 different council worlds, reported scanner. Technician Valnara, whose normally steady voice was shaking with disbelief. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases, and they appeared without any advance warning or detectable approach. Vectors. Zektul moved to the main display and felt his crystalline structure vibrate with shock. The screen showed real-time feeds from monitoring satellites around major council worlds, including the Veltar homeworld of Kristhara, the Zephyrian military center of Essica Home, and the Luminari trade hub of Brightstar. Around each planet hung formations of ships that definitely had not been there moments before. Impossible, Zektul muttered as he studied the readings. No vessels of any known design can appear in multiple star systems simultaneously. Even our most advanced dimensional gateway technology requires several minutes to establish stable connections between distant locations. Valnara was working frantically at her station trying to make sense of the data her instruments were providing. Sir, the vessels appear to be human in origin, but that cannot be correct. Human ships require weeks to travel between star systems using our hyperspace networks, and we have been monitoring all authorized human movements since their relocation orders were issued. The main communication system activated and filled the control center with the voice of High Counselor Vexutherin speaking from the emergency session chamber on Kristhara. His normally musical tone was sharp with panic and confusion. All monitoring stations report immediately. We have unidentified vessels appearing around major council worlds with no advance warning and no detectable method of arrival. Zektul activated his transmission system and tried to keep his voice steady. Monitoring Station 7 reporting, sir. We confirm the appearance of unknown vessels around 17 council worlds. Energy signatures suggest human origin, but travel method is completely unknown to our science. On the display screen, the image shifted to show a closer view of the mysterious ships, and Zektul felt his form dim with amazement. These were not the clumsy metal constructions that humans had shown the galaxy during their first contact. These vessels were sleek and elegant, with hulls that seemed to bend light around them and no visible propulsion systems or weapon ports. They moved through space with perfect coordination, as if they were all controlled by a single mind. Scanner technician Velnara suddenly gasped and pointed at her readings. "Sir, I am detecting quantum displacement signatures unlike anything in our theoretical models. These ships are not using hyperspace or dimensional gateways. They appear to be manipulating spacetime itself." Before Zektul could respond, the communication system activated again, but this time, the voice that filled the control center was human. Captain Jake Morrison appeared on the main screen, and behind him was the bridge of a ship that looked nothing like the primitive human vessels the Council remembered. The technology visible in the background was clearly advanced but built on principles that the aliens did not recognize. "Greetings, Council members," Jake said with a confidence that made Zekatul's form flicker with unease. "We received your relocation orders, and we wanted to thank you for providing us with the perfect opportunity to demonstrate some of our capabilities that we had not previously shared with the galactic community." The display split to show views from around 17 different council worlds, and Zektul realized that every major population center in the galaxy was now surrounded by human ships that had appeared without warning. The formations were perfect, with each vessel maintaining precise distances and orientations that suggested military discipline of the highest order. "You see, honored council members," Jake continued as the camera pulled back to show more of his ship's bridge, "you made a critical error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that what we showed you during our diplomatic contacts represented the full extent of our technological development. You forgot that humans are above all else survivors, and survivors always keep their best weapons hidden until they need them." Zektul watched in growing horror as the human ships began to demonstrate capabilities that should have been impossible for a species the Council had dismissed as primitive. The vessels moved through space in formations that required instantaneous communication across vast distances. They appeared and disappeared from scanner readings as if they could control their own visibility. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be scanning the Council worlds with instruments that penetrated every type of shielding and defensive system. Admiral Lisa Carter's voice joined the transmission, and her image appeared beside Jake's. "For the past 18 months, while you have been dismissing us as backward children, we have been developing technology based on principles that your science has apparently overlooked. Dr. Rodriguez, would you care to explain our propulsion system to the Council?" Dr. Alex Rodriguez appeared on screen, standing in what looked like an impossible chamber, filled with swirling energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Counselors, meet quantum displacement technology. We do not travel through your hyperspace networks because we do not need to. We fold spacetime itself, which means your monitoring stations, your defensive grids, your carefully controlled borders are all completely meaningless to us." The Council emergency session erupted in panicked discussions that could be heard through the communication link. Feltar voices created harmonics of fear, while Cephirian hisses indicated extreme agitation, and the Luminari energy forms flickered rapidly with what could only be described as terror. "Commander," Scrath's reptilian voice cut through the chaos, as his scales shifted to colors that indicated both anger and fear. "This technology should be impossible for their development level. Our observations showed them using primitive chemical propulsion and basic metal construction." Colonel Ben Harper's image replaced the scientist, and behind him tactical displays showed real-time positions of every Council fleet in the galaxy. "You also made assumptions about our military doctrine that have proven to be incorrect. You have spent centuries perfecting energy weapons and defensive shields. Very impressive technology, but you have forgotten some basic principles about the elegance of kinetic force." As Harper spoke, brilliant streaks of light began falling from the human ships toward the 17 Council worlds. Zektul watched his scanners track the incoming projectiles and felt his crystalline form darken with dread as he realized what was happening. The humans were not firing energy weapons or plasma charges, but simple solid objects moving at speeds that approached the velocity of light itself. The impacts were precisely targeted at military installations and government facilities on each world. Every strike released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons, but with surgical precision that avoided populated areas. The aliens' energy shields flickered and failed against solid matter moving at relativistic speeds, and explosions bloomed across the surfaces of planets that had considered themselves completely protected tungsten carbide projectiles, accelerated to 97% light speed. Harper explained with casual satisfaction. Your energy shields are designed to deflect energy-based attacks. They are quite useless against solid matter moving at these velocities. Dr. Emma Walsh appeared next, and her smile was cold and calculating in a way that made Zektool's form shiver with primal fear. And then there is the matter of biology. Did you know that Veltar neural networks operate on a very specific electromagnetic frequency that can be disrupted with targeted signals? Or that Zephyrian respiratory systems become toxic when exposed to modified atmospheric compositions? We have been studying you far more carefully than you have been studying us. The transmission ended, leaving the monitoring station in stunned silence. Around 17. Council World's human fleets maintained perfect orbital positions, demonstrating capabilities that made every previous assumption about human limitations completely wrong. The species that the Council had dismissed as primitive children had just revealed technology that surpassed anything in the galactic community. Zektool stared at his displays showing the impossible human ships and realized that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted permanently. The humans had not simply built better weapons or faster ships. They had developed an entirely different approach to space travel, warfare, and apparently biology that made them the most dangerous species anyone had ever encountered. The worst part was the growing certainty that what they had just witnessed was only the beginning of what humanity was actually capable of doing. High Counselor Vextheron stood in the emergency chamber on Chrysthera, watching displays that showed human ships maintaining perfect formations around his homeworld and feeling terror unlike anything he had experienced in his 1,000-year lifespan. The crystalline walls around him flickered with chaotic patterns as his emotional state affected the building's energy systems. Around the chamber, other council members were experiencing similar breakdowns of their normally perfect composure. Commander, Scrath paced back and forth with his scales shifting through colors that indicated extreme agitation and fear. His clawed hands kept opening and closing as if he wanted to attack something but had no target within reach. The Zephyrian military commander had built his reputation on understanding warfare better than any other species in the galaxy, but the humans had just demonstrated capabilities that made all his knowledge useless. Sage Aelvin hovered near the center of the chamber with her energy form pulsing erratically between bright flashes and dim fading. The luminary elder had lived for thousands of years and witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of galactic civilizations, but she had never seen anything like what humanity had just revealed. The very foundations of everything she thought she knew about technology and space travel had been shattered in the span of minutes. How is this possible? Vextheron demanded, as he studied tactical displays that showed human vessels appearing and disappearing from sensors around every major council world. Our intelligence reports indicated that human technology was centuries behind our own. Their fastest ships required weeks to travel between star systems, and their weapons could not penetrate even basic defensive shields. Eskrath stopped pacing and turned toward the displays with his neck scales shifting to deep red. Either our intelligence was completely wrong or the humans have been deliberately hiding their true capabilities from the beginning, he hissed with growing anger. No species develops quantum displacement technology and relativistic kinetic weapons without decades of advanced research and testing. The communication system activated again, and Captain Jake Morrison reappeared on the main screen, but now the camera angle showed the true scale of his command vessel. The ship stretched beyond the edges of the display, and its hull was covered with markings and symbols that clearly indicated this was not some hastily built prototype but a mature military vessel from an established fleet. Counselors, Jake said with the same confident tone that was making the aliens increasingly uncomfortable. I believe there may be some confusion about humanity's actual technological capabilities. Allow me to provide some clarification that might help you understand your situation better. Behind Jake, the bridge of his ship bustled with activity, as human crew members operated control systems that looked nothing like the primitive interfaces the Council remembered from their previous encounters. The technology was clearly advanced, but built according to design principles that the aliens did not recognize or understand. Dr. Alex Rodriguez appeared beside Jake and gestured toward displays that showed technical specifications the Council had never seen before. The quantum displacement system we demonstrated today represents approximately 15 years of development based on theoretical work that began shortly after our first contact with galactic civilization, he explained with scientific precision. We realized very quickly that your hyperspace networks had certain limitations that could be overcome through direct manipulation of space-time geometry, Vex. Theron felt his crystalline structure vibrate with shock as he processed the implications of what the human scientist was saying. 15 years, he whispered to himself. They have been working on this technology since before. They even joined the council, Admiral. Lisa Carter stepped into view, and her expression carried the cold professionalism of someone who had spent decades planning military operations. The council made certain assumptions about humanity based on limited observations, she said with clinical detachment. You saw our exploration vessels and diplomatic ships and concluded that those represented our peak technological achievement. You never considered that a species might choose to keep their most advanced capabilities secret until they needed them. Colonel Ben Harper joined the transmission, and behind him tactical displays showed detailed analysis of every council military installation in the galaxy. Your assessment of our military doctrine was similarly flawed, he continued with satisfaction. You assumed that because we showed you chemical rockets and metal projectiles, we had not developed more sophisticated weapons. You forgot that sometimes the most effective approach is to let your enemy underestimate your capabilities until you choose to demonstrate them. Dr. Emma Walsh appeared on screen, and her smile carried implications that made several council members physically recoil. The biological research was particularly interesting, she said, as medical displays showed detailed anatomical information about every major species in the galactic community. Did you know that prolonged exposure to specific electromagnetic frequencies can cause temporary paralysis in Veltar nervous systems? Or that Zephyrian muscle coordination becomes severely impaired when their blood chemistry is altered by targeted aerosol compounds? Sage Ilvin's energy form flared with alarm as she realized what the human doctor was describing. You have been testing biological weapons against our species, she accused with horror. Walsh shook her head with mock innocence. Not weapons exactly. More like detailed scientific studies of how your biology responds to various environmental modifications. All completely reversible and harmless, of course, but very informative about your vulnerabilities and limitations. Commander Scrath roared with rage as his scales turned black with fury. This is a violation of every treaty and agreement governing interspecies relations. You conducted unauthorized biological experiments on council members without their knowledge or consent, Captain. Jake Morrison reappeared on screen, and his expression had lost all pretense of diplomacy or respect. Commander Scrath, I think you may be confused about which species has been violating treaties and agreements. 3 months ago, this council declared that humanity was too primitive to remain in civilized space and ordered our relocation to the Outer Rim territories. That was done without any consultation with human representatives and without any opportunity for us to defend ourselves against your accusations, Admiral. Carter stepped forward, and her voice carried the authority of someone who commanded fleets, capable of destroying entire star systems. The council made its judgment based on incomplete information and refused to consider that they might be wrong about human capabilities. That was your choice, and now you must live with the consequences of that choice. Dr. Rodriguez activated new displays that showed star charts marking the locations of human colonies and research facilities that the council had never known existed. While you were busy dismissing us as backward primitives, we were establishing scientific outposts throughout the galaxy, using quantum displacement technology. Your monitoring stations and border controls never detected us because we were not using any of your approved travel methods. The displays shifted to show images of massive construction projects hidden in asteroid fields and nebulae where human engineers had been building ships and weapons far from any alien observation. The scale of the operations was staggering and clearly represented years of coordinated effort involving resources the Council had never suspected humanity possessed. Colonel Harper brought up tactical assessments that made the alien military commanders pale with fear. Our current fleet strength includes approximately 800 vessels equipped with quantum displacement drives and relativistic kinetic weapons. Each ship is capable of appearing anywhere in the galaxy without warning and delivering enough firepower to eliminate any target we choose. Your defensive systems are designed to counter-energy weapons and are completely useless. Against our primary armament, Dr. Walsh added her own contribution with biological warfare assessments that detailed exactly how human scientists could incapacitate or eliminate any species in the galactic community using targeted compounds that would be undetectable until they took effect. We have also developed delivery systems for biological agents that your medical technology cannot detect or counteract. These weapons could be deployed through your air recycling systems, your food, supplies, or even through direct contact during diplomatic meetings. Vex Theran felt his entire worldview crumbling as he realized that humanity had played a deception game that lasted for years and had completely fooled every intelligence service in the galactic community. "What do you want from us?" he asked with the defeated tone of someone who knew they had been outmaneuvered. "Completely." Jake Morrison smiled for the first time since the transmission began, but it was not a friendly expression. "Counselor, that is an excellent question, and one that we will be happy to answer. But first, we think it would be appropriate for you to experience what it feels like to be dismissed and underestimated by a superior force. Consider this a learning experience about the importance of treating other species with proper respect." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence as the aliens contemplated their new reality, the species they had insulted and exiled. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 6 hours, and the alien leaders were no closer to understanding what humanity actually wanted from them. High Counselor Vex Theran stood before displays showing human fleets maintaining perfect positions around 17 council worlds while his crystalline form flickered with exhaustion and stress. The humans had demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority, but they had not made any demands or issued any ultimatums. Commander Scrath paced frantically around the chamber with his scales shifting through colors that indicated confusion, mixed with growing desperation. "They have the power to destroy every major world in our territory," he hissed as his clawed hands gestured at the tactical displays. "Why are they just sitting there maintaining orbital positions without taking any action?" Sage Elvin hovered near the communication console with her energy form, pulsing dimly as she tried to understand human psychology based on everything she had observed during their brief membership in the galactic community. "Perhaps they are waiting for us to make the first move," she suggested with uncertainty. Human behavior patterns often involve psychological manipulation designed to create maximum emotional impact. The main communication system activated and Captain Jake Morrison appeared on screen once again, but this time the camera angle showed him standing on what appeared to be an observation deck overlooking space. Behind him, the curved hull of his massive ship stretched away into the distance while Earth hung in the background like a blue jewel against the black void of space. "Greetings, council members," Jake said with the same confident tone that had been making the aliens increasingly uncomfortable. "We hope you have had sufficient time to consider the demonstration we provided and to reflect on some of the assumptions you made about humanity's place in galactic civilization." Admiral Lisa Carter stepped into view beside Jake, and her expression showed the satisfaction of someone whose carefully planned operation had succeeded beyond all expectations. "The Council made its judgment about human capabilities based on limited observations and refused to consider that you might be missing important information. That was your choice, and we respect your right to make decisions based on incomplete data." Vex Theran activated his transmission system and tried to keep his voice steady, despite the fear that was making his crystalline structure vibrate with nervous energy. "Captain Morrison, what are humanity's intentions regarding the current situation? Your fleets have demonstrated capabilities that exceed anything in our databases, but you have made no demands or requests for any specific actions." Dr. Alex Rodriguez appeared on screen and gestured toward technical displays that showed quantum displacement systems operating at scales the aliens had never imagined possible. "Counselor Vex Theran, our intentions are quite simple, and we think you will find them reasonable," he said with scientific precision. "We want to establish a new relationship between humanity and the galactic community based on accurate assessment of capabilities rather than assumptions and prejudices." Colonel Ben Harper joined the transmission, and behind him, tactical displays showed human ships beginning to fade from sensors around the 17 council worlds. "The demonstration you witnessed today represents approximately 15% of our actual military capabilities," he explained with casual satisfaction. We thought it would be appropriate to give you a small sample of what humanity has developed. While you were busy dismissing us as primitive children, Dr. Emma Walsh appeared next, and her smile carried implications that made several council members physically uncomfortable. The biological research data we collected during our diplomatic interactions has been very useful for understanding how different species respond to various environmental modifications, she said as medical displays showed detailed vulnerability assessments. We now have comprehensive information about every major weakness and limitation of every species in the galactic community. Sage Aelvin's energy form flared with alarm as she processed the implications of what the humans were describing. You have been conducting intelligence-gathering operations against us since your first contact with galactic civilization, she accused with growing horror. Captain Jake Morrison nodded with complete honesty. Of course we have Sage Aelvin. Any species that survives long enough to reach the stars learns that information is the most valuable resource in the universe. We studied your technology, your biology, your military capabilities, and your political structures, because that is what intelligent beings do when they encounter potential threats or allies. Admiral Carter stepped forward, and her voice carried the authority of someone who commanded forces capable of reshaping galactic politics. The difference between humanity and the Council species is that we never assumed we already knew everything we needed to know. You made the mistake of thinking that 3 years of limited observation was sufficient to understand what humans are capable of accomplishing. Commander Scrath roared with frustration as his scales turned red with anger. What do you want? From us? Do you demand our surrender? Are you here to conquer our worlds? Are you planning to impose human rule over the galactic community? Jake Morrison looked genuinely puzzled by the question and exchanged glances with his colleagues before responding. Commander Scrath, we do not want your territory, your resources, or your submission. We have no interest in ruling over other species or imposing human government on alien worlds. We simply want the respect that any advanced civilization deserves from its peers. The camera angle shifted to show the full scope of the human fleet as ships began engaging their quantum displacement drives and fading from normal space. But before they disappeared completely, Admiral Carter delivered humanity's final message to the Council. The next time you encounter a species you consider primitive, remember this day, she said with cold satisfaction. Remember that the most dangerous predator is often the one that allows you to think you are the hunter. Remember that assumptions, based on limited information, can have serious consequences for those who make them. Dr. Rodriguez added his own contribution as his image began to fade. We will be returning to our activities throughout the galaxy now. But remember that what you witnessed today was just a small demonstration of human capabilities. The other, 85% of our technology will remain our secret for now. Colonel Harper's final words carried a warning that made every alien in the chamber shiver with fear. Humanity will remember your insult, counselors. But we will also remember that some lessons are best taught through demonstration rather than destruction. Consider yourselves educated about the realities of galactic politics. Dr. Walsh delivered the closing statement with a smile that promised future consequences for anyone who underestimated humanity again. We hope this experience has been educational for the Council. The next time you decide to relocate a species to the Outer Rim territories, you might want to make sure you actually understand what that species is capable of doing. The transmission ended, and the human fleets vanished from sensors around the 17 Council worlds, leaving the aliens to contemplate a galaxy where humanity was no longer the junior partner, but an equal player who had simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal their true strength. Vex Theron stared at the empty displays and felt the weight of his 1,000 years pressing down on him like a physical force. In the span of a single day, everything he thought he knew about galactic civilization had been proven wrong. The species they had dismissed as primitive children had revealed technology that surpassed anything the Council possessed, and military capabilities that could reshape the balance of power throughout known space. Commander Scrath slumped in his chair with his scales fading to gray, as he realized that every tactical assessment his people had made about human capabilities was completely worthless. The humans had played a deception game that lasted for years and had fooled every intelligence service in the galactic community. Sage Elvin dimmed her energy form as she contemplated the philosophical implications of what had just occurred. The Luminari had believed they understood the natural order of galactic civilization, but humanity had just demonstrated that wisdom and age meant nothing compared to intelligence and preparation. In the months that followed, the Council's attitude toward humanity shifted dramatically. Relocation orders were quietly rescinded without any official announcement. Trade agreements became far more favorable to human interests. Diplomatic protocols were revised to treat humanity as a major power rather than a junior member. Most importantly, whenever Council members encountered other species they deemed primitive, they found themselves remembering the day that humanity taught them the difference between appearing weak and actually being weak. The humans had learned the most important lesson of galactic politics, which was that respect could not be given or requested, but had to be earned through demonstration of capability. They had also learned that sometimes the best way to earn that respect was to let others underestimate you until the moment you chose to show them exactly how wrong their assumptions had been. The galaxy was a very different place now, and humanity had claimed their rightful position among the stars not through conquest or domination, but through the simp